This is the Lekker Rugby Pod with Harry Jones and MV Welman.
It's probably the biggest rugby weekend of the year, and then just following on, that's another one next week in Cape Town. But this week, we're facing the All Blacks at Ellis Park, the old cathedral of rugby in South Africa. And I'm going to talk to Harry about that. But before we do that, I want to just welcome our new sponsor, latest sponsor, Sit and Cars, to our channel. They're going to be sponsoring both our channel and the Lekker Rugby Pod. So that's Andrea and his team at Sit and Cars. Welcome. It's nice to have you on board. And thank you for supporting MEGAFOON Sport, our channel. Well, without further ado, let's start chatting. How's it, Harry?
How's it, MV? I'm in Heathrow. I'm on the way. I'm halfway there. I only go around the world for really big matches. Luckily, I almost always pick the right ones. I was at Wellington in 2018 and it has a weirdly similar feeling, except all the roles have reversed. The betting lines and the handicaps are making it really tough on us to claim underdog status. So what I'm coming down on is that we're better and we should win. And we are, the world champs, but we're still the underdogs. I'm not even going to supply a logic or rationale for that. I insist that we're underdogs forever. And that's the hill I'm going to stand on and die on. We're better, but we're underdogs. That's my tagline.
You asked me the very first time we ever had a chat. You asked me, and I said, that's exactly mine. We can never be the underdogs. This is the favorites. I mean, we cannot be the favorites because then we lose. And funny enough, last night at the Bulls prize giving, Jake White said exactly the same thing. He does not like South Africa being the favorites. We need to be the underdogs. So we'll do it even if we aren't, we are.
This is my only explanation for the exotic selection patterns is at least it gives you the feel of being underdogs, when you have a novice 10 and a novice 15 and you have people scrambled around at locks and stuff. Maybe you could say, see, we're underdogs again, just to convince your own guys, just inside the locker room that it's, against the most experienced, tough, big, giant All Blacks.
I see we ruffled a few feathers this week with our analogy of the big brother, people taking offense to it. In the sense that, how can you say that we're the big brother? You're the big brother, that kind of a thing. So I like that idea of we're forcing ourselves to be the underdogs. That's typical Rassi. And I want to ask you, that leads me on to my next question. This whole thing with Eben, the whole kerfuffle. When you and I last spoke, it was Monday. We just heard the news that Eben might not be there. And that was before the team was even announced. And then the team was announced without Eben. And then Eben came back, but Eben came back on the bench. I mean, it has all the hallmarks of Rassi trick again, or isn't it? The mind game. What's your take on that?
Yeah, we keep hearing Mark Plan inside this camp. Maybe it's Mark Pape. I don't know what Rassi was on, but instead of Quagga Smith, it was Daga Smith. And he was all over the show, wasn't he? I think he was either hopped up, maybe he just jumped out of an airplane and was skydiving, and that kind of gives you the feeling of a high and a low at the same time. But it did look like classic Rassi in that he was having arguments with himself. He had parentheticals inside his parentheticals, but the key word was miracle. And so he presaged that, maybe he's trying to deliver miracles now in the new age of Rassi. He can do everything. It was pretty obvious that there was a plot afoot. You memorialized this in a text to me, which I screenshotted, and I can prove that you said, "No, mark my words, Eben will play." So I guess the more important thing about those two things, I mean, who wouldn't play Eben Etzebeth if he was able? Every team in World Rugby would. Every single team in World Rugby would put Eben Etzebeth in their team above their current locks. That's just a fact. The two angles are why on the bench, and the second one is when you put Eben back in, who drops out, and that gives you more of an inkling about what Tony and the guys are thinking. So Marco van Staden sort of got to the 2021 caps level. That's a good sign that they believe in him. But perhaps on the versatility index, he fell behind Elrich Low, who demonstrated to the coaches that he could play several different ways. He could play to the ball, he could play over the ball, he could play off the ball, and he could be a rip-snorting, smash-mouth, snot-knocking tackler. And perhaps that's the part where Marco van Staden, maybe with his height deficit compared to Low, step back. And then again, I think you also see how well, I mean, we've documented this with my play-by-play of Ben Jason Dixon, but Ben Jason Dixon and Elrich Low keep their slot, and Marco drops out with Eben coming in. So you could argue that it was just a matter of having a proper lock, but I'm not sure that's true. I think that's our best inkling on depth charts now, where the respective loose forwards fit. And we're coming back to the idea of, could that player play across all three positions, and with Low even play lock? The other thing is why Ibben's on the bench. And I think, we're getting to the point now in rugby where we're not stuck in the old orthodoxies about you're a starter. I mean, Ibben has nothing to prove, right? So I don't think there's any part of Ibben that says, if I'm not starting, I'm not playing, or he's not going to sulk or pout. The idea of an indomitable bomb squad, a bench that cannot be beaten, a bench where you can say, I know that all I got to do is stay in the picture and then we swamp you, is attractive in the age-old mythology of All Blacks versus Springboks, because usually it's the All Blacks that break our hearts, which is why they're the elder sibling, by the way, because you always think, no, I've got it, then boom, they take it. So, the record in South Africa, come on, guys, let's be honest, it's basically even, and it's not even in New Zealand, so they're the older brother. And I think what we want to do is to say, we're going to flip the script. If the game is drawn or close at 60 minutes, and you bringing on Andre, Eben, Malcolm Marx, Vincent Koch, you should win, because what do you have on the other side that can balance that? In the old days, what you would have is, a full set of players, then you'd bring on Beauden Barrett, and that'd be your 23. Now Beauden Barrett is inside there. He's the older statesman, and Damian McKenzie struggling to make his mark. So I think Rassi's thought pattern there is, I like what I saw in Perth, where it was inevitable. Once the bomb squad came on, it was done. You knew it was done. And that hasn't worked against the All Blacks. They've typically been better than us in the final 20 and final 30. So maybe it's supersizing that bench, in addition to, obviously, the fact that if he does have a slight niggle, it allows you to play a little bit less minutes, and you can tell Eben that, and you can time it. And he can almost talk to you about it and say, I'm feeling this, I'm feeling that. So all in all, it's part of this bigger story of the Rassi era, which is, don't do everything the way everyone else is doing it. Announce your team so early that you still have an ability to change your team. That way, then you're inside the head of the other team where they're trying to pick, do we have Scooter Barrett at 4? Do we move him at 6? What are we doing? And then by the time you change it, it's almost like you've wasted all their time that week. So mind games, or he was just having a good time and had too many coffees and beers.
Yeah, or something. You'll never know. Listen, the question I'm asking is, okay, now Eben's on the bench. You've now explained that a bit. Why Peter Steph the toy at 4? That does not make any sense to me. Rassi, for all his far-sightedness and forward planning and everything else, has been caught out here. Make no mistake. I mean, there's not enough number 4 locks. You had Eben and you had Samuel Murat. They were both injured. John Klein was injured and everybody else was injured. Shouldn't Rassi have foreseen this maybe and built a bit more depth? You and I keep talking about the 2-3 position or players in each position in terms of depth, not at number 4. And now we've been caught out. That's the first question, is what about that depth? And number 2, why is Peter Steph the toy at number 4? He's not a number 4 lock, I don't think so. And next thing is you lose his ability to play on the edges as a proper number 7 in South African terms. And it's a double whammy for me picking him at 4, not just because he's not good enough as a 4. That's a terrible thing to say. Not a natural number 4, but you're also losing his number 7 contribution to the team. What do you make of that?
The macro issue is more important, which is a lack of depth at tight head lock, enforcer lock. These are one of the most difficult animals to breed and raise and find, and they don't exist that much. They're often injured. Eben's a freak. Etzebeth is obviously played center in high school, even up to 11th grade. So he had natural athleticism that doesn't exist in the big bully lock usually. It also allowed him to take care of his body. He's a student of it. He has routines. He doesn't talk at all on game day. He only eats pasta. He has superstitions. This is kind of a difficult, person to get your mind around. There's guys like Amaro Atoje. Back in the day, there was Brody Retallick. But in the end, it's a very difficult position to stay healthy. And the French have had hell as well, keeping their locks healthy. So we just run into a situation which happens from time to time, in that you have one position that you have a generational player He's giving you 125 caps. He's got some trouble. You're trying to, fill it in, and you just have this unfortunate timing of Franco, Archia, Jean Klein, just going down the list. We talked about the lock crisis last week. So the macro, for sure, we need to find the natural successor to Bakkies and Eben. It's usually a definitional, a seminal position in South African rugby. Who your big guy is. Your big guy, if your big guy plays the best on the field, then we are in good shape. Every good Springbok team has had wonderful locks that complement each other. I saw this English player talking to Charlie Morgan this week, and he was just referring to archetypes. And he said, you're either a Bakkies or you're a Victor. And I thought that was interesting that even an English player who wasn't referring to South African rugby knows the position. Pieter-Steph can play lock better than the other lock candidates once you go beyond Eben. So that's the answer is maybe he's not a natural forward. Maybe he's not going to test out with the same strength metric. But I don't know, because I think he'll still play better. First of all, there's only going to be between 5 and 10 scrums. That's the only time that a four-lock is trapped in the four-lock position. All other times you can mix and match. So we saw in Australia that he played lock and still played on the trams and played a wing against Korobete, because at lineouts and in the 150 to 180 rucks that occur, Pieter-Steph can play wherever he wants. So it's just that one little slice of the match where he's locked in. And even then, I don't think he's a big drop-off in strength. People are telling me that Pieter-Steph is testing higher in fitness levels, and in his body, his actual body core strength is at its peak. He's never been more healthy. And he's one of those guys that doesn't look like the Jesse Creels or the Eben Etzebeths in the gym, but he's got a natural strength to it, Wasn't it his father was called Speeder? I mean, how strong do you have to be called Muscles in the Boerland? Like, I don't know, but I think it's probably pretty strong. Like, can you lift that wagon? Yeah. So, and his dad wasn't that big. So, there's that kind of strength per weight ratio. Lance Armstrong for the Tour de France talked about that, how there's some guys who could just keep losing weight and be leaner and leaner, but still keep their strength. It's almost phenomenal. Pieter-Steph going to Japan has been able to work on some things in his body, and I think it's very functional. I've heard that he does a lot more like plyometrics type exercises. He's not just sitting there and just pumping iron, trying to get like a big chest. He's more about getting down on the floor and using body weight. I trust him to do the job. But I think what Rassie is saying and his forward coaches are saying is, if there's even a hint of a drop-off there on what they're looking for, like at the scrum, hello, Eben, come on in. Pieter-Steph slides over, and now you got whatever you want. If Sia goes off, you've got Ben, Jason Dixon, and Pieter-Steph on the sides, with Eben and Ruan. And then that's a proper big pack.
My dad always used to say, you get the difference in strength between a farmer and a gym boy, if you want to call it that, is, lugging a bag of millies. It's not the same thing as picking up weights. But lugging a bag of millies is natural strength. You grow up in a farm, that's what you get used to. And that's exactly what you're referring to. It's true. I can see it.
No doubt. And I've always heard, basically, you look at a guy's wrists and you look at, there's some telltale signs. Like, you see someone who's really built themselves up. This happened to Tiger Woods. He messed up his body because he was a naturally, really skinny guy. I remember walking up to him at the Masters tournament one time and standing next to him, and I could not believe how skinny a guy he was. But he packed on muscles, deltoids, and did a triangular, and he ended up putting too much muscle mass on a body frame. A guy like Pieter-Steph, or also I think of a guy like Jasper Wiese. I don't know what Jasper Wiese's squat or bench is. I don't know if he cares, but I know that he's just built in a way that's it can take a lot of beating. Like if you walked into a bar and that was your trouble that night, and you saw Jasper Wiese, you would say, "I'm going to need a tool. This is not going to be grappling." So there's something about you look at those guys and they form that way. Sia Kolisi's a bit that way. Kolisi back in school was just able to power through contact, I think it was from Gray in PE. He could just go through tackles. And so it's difficult to quantify these things in rugby. It's not quite as simple as some sports where the ability to lift a ton in the gym can translate, like maybe a wrestling. Wrestling would be an example of, there's clearly benefits to having pure power. Rugby is so functional. Like you see how many times they have to be on the floor, off the floor, jump around, move around, position. Pietersteph did a steal in Perth, I think it was, where he laid off a tackle. He refused to be involved in it. He just would not be implicated in the tackle, kept backpedaling, waited until Harry Wilson got over the gain line and then snaffled him. He can do that from lock. He can do that from flank. He can do that if he's playing wing.
Yeah. I saw something sometime today, I can't remember where, somebody said, if you stand next to Jasper Wiese, it looks like you're in a picture, and the picture was squashed because the guy's so wide. It looks unnaturally wide. It's like a block. So it's an interesting observation there. Something else that you and I talked about is the actual most important player in this game, the one that everybody is sort of complaining about or singing hallelujahs about, but the fact of the matter is he's going to be the pivotal player. And surprisingly, it's Aphelele Fassi. You had quite a bit of a few things to say about it. You had quite a few things to say about it. Tell me about it. I'm interested to hear that.
Well, so my personality is such that no matter what the decision was before, what I thought before, once the decision's made, I just want to find either humor in it or irony. So the whole Church of Fassi thing is just amusing. I just find it funny. I'm trying to learn the orthodoxy, liturgy, the theology of it, and it's hilarious. I think Aphelele Fassi is a very different archetype of fullback than Leroux. Look at Leroux, and he's kind of like he's like an alter ego of Rassie. I've always thought that if you want to know about a coach, whether it's Andy Farrell or Steve Borthwick or Eddie Jones or Michael Checker, look at their traditional fullback. Like, look at the fullback they almost always pick. Joe Schmidt, Rob Carney, picked him through thick and thin. Didn't matter what people said. Rassie has really enjoyed Willie because Willie almost taps into what I'll call the grumpy side of Rassie. And Fassi taps into what I'll call the Joel side. I mean, he's the weekend special for a reason, because I think Rassie doesn't mind having some partiers in the team. He doesn't only want to have Pietersteph du Toit guys who are straight arrows and good citizens and, are going to farm with the money they make from rugby. I think he also wants to see a guy who can move and glide and do the things that, in a way, Rassie did as a flank. He wasn't the most traditional hard man flank, Rassie, when he was a player. He's a bit like in the Rob Lowe mold, where he was a bit loose. So I think Fassi is intriguing to him because there's just things he can do that Willie cannot do. Fassi's numbers, our friend analyst Gust, and everyone should take a look at him. He probably does the best what I'll call straight, no excuses, numbers-based analysis of South African rugby that's out there. And he kind of compares, and it's like two different people. It's amazing how different it is. What I've heard is that Willie hurt his ribs in practice, and that was the reason. But I think there's another reason that might have been, if it was 50-50, that they went with it, is the kicking length. I think when you step on the field at Ellis Park and you just behold the flight of the ball and you realize how big a problem it can be if you can do a spiral bomb that goes 50, 60 meters into the wrong quadrant, and Caleb Clark or Will Jordan is having to backpedal. Will Jordan's had a lot of trouble with the high ball. He did very badly against the French in the World Cup, and he did not do well in the final against us. And he struggled a little bit from time to time at club level too. The importance of having a big boot. Willie did have a big boot. I think his boot is getting a little bit smaller nowadays. And also, one of the hardest things on your ribs and your hamstrings and your old man muscles is kicking the shit out of a ball. It's really tough. Just go out right now to the park, and I don't care what you were when you were back in school. Try to do that. Just rip in there. Fassi's got a lever on him. I mean, that's like a fulcrum. I mean, I think the same thing that makes you quick on a long stride in sort of a Usain Bolt kind of running style that he's got. It's the same thing that can whack a ball. And so I think you're going to look at some length. And it strikes me that the Boks have been moving towards that. Yes, from the 9 box, a box kicks from the 9, but from the 10, more positional kicks, a lot of diagonal and side kicks and kick passes. And from 15, there is a lot of analytics about the team that just can really get that extra 4 or 5 meters. It sets everything back. Number one, like if they cannot respond in kind, if Beauden Barrett's not going to be able to match Fassi on the boot, you've already got territory for free. All you had to do was kick it and you got it. Second, they make a mistake and you're off to the races. Third, it means that sometimes Beauden Barrett might be tempted to launch from deep. And that's where the counter can happen. You get turned over, there's a penalty or something happens. So I think there's all those reasons beyond the idea of Fassi's speed is just the prodigious length of his boot.
Sitten Cars has a wide selection of vehicles available at sittencars.co.za and at our branches at Casino and Menlyn. With over 30 years of trust and excellence, Sitten Cars is your #1 nationwide dealership. With over 95% customer satisfaction, our hand-picked cars will ensure that you find your dream car from one of the top brands available at Sitten Cars. Sitten Cars, the better way to buy and sell cars. Now, you mentioned the fact that Willie got injured. So does that suggest that if he didn't get injured, or we might have been injured, he would have played? And do you think that he would have still been in a combination with Sasha? Or do you think maybe if Willie was able to play, Andre would have played? Is that maybe that a double whammy? Or what do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, the ever wise and omniscient Rugby suggests that it was a combination pick. So you have to have a playmaker. Andre is a wonderful player. He's the Iceman, but he's a little bit challenged in igniting red zone attacks. So then Willie does that for him. If you have Sasha on the field, he's like the ignition switch. He's always thinking. He always seems to find space. He has time on the ball. So then you can weave in the killer, the assassin. The Church of Fassi can come and put everything to bed. I do think they're going to look for ways to find him space. I'll go back to the Perth game where you asked me about how they used Mani and Andre, and there were 3 instances that I broke down, and I went frame by frame by frame. Fassi was in the right place. He was actually in a beautiful place. All they had to do was Lekanyo arm didn't need to go crash ball. Mani had to be in the right spot to get the feedback. I watched that again, and I think Andre put the ball the right place. Mani was in the wrong place. And the third one was it was just a choice, and it didn't go his way. But if Fassi can be in that slot in kind of the flats, we'll call it, and kind of lurk, almost loiter, and become invisible until suddenly he's not, I think there's going to be a couple of tries that could be scored. This probably is a match where tries will be scored. So it's not going to be enough to grind out threes and, kick 18 points off the tee. So I think Sasha and Fassi create the ability to score from even broken play. And just think about how many game breakers then you have on the field. You've got Creel, who's still a game breaker. You have Colby, you have Arendse, and you have Fassi, and you have Sasha. And Kobus Reinach is well known to English fans for being a game breaker and French fans from basically the base of the ruck. And with more room, both Williams and Reinach could be guys who can take it to the house. So I think what they're trying to do is be a dangerous team from the first second to the 80th minute, but just have enough salvation on the bench to make the Church of Fassi metaphor. You have these angels coming on to rescue you. You've got Marks and Koch and Eben and Pollard.
Or demons. What matter?
The 4 horsemen.
Okay. The thing about Fassi that a lot of the debate's about is the fact that he might have a few weak points. It might be a very big game for him to start, like against the All Blacks. It's the biggest game of the year. The next week, it's another one. So what is his weak points? What are people so worried about? What would the All Blacks see when they see him, apart from all the positive things you talked about? What are the negatives that the All Blacks might focus on and try to exploit with Fassi there and in the same breath with Sasha there?
He has the negatives of every great athlete, which is he believes he has more time and space than he does. So Fassi is actually very intelligent in knowing if I had to get that 13 meters, how much time would it take me and how much of a start would I need? But sometimes you can start to believe you have more because at every level up to this point, he was superior. And so whilst he wasn't the most polished rugby player, he just has an ability to recover from mistakes. So he could be in the wrong place, but still chase down a guy like, I mean, he's chased down people at Currie Cup level and in Super Rugby level and wherever else he's played, where you go, how did you do that? That kind of recovery speed. That doesn't really work. The IRC is not the same as Test rugby against the All Blacks. So if Caleb Clark is gone, he's gone. Like, you're not going to catch Caleb Clark. Damian Willemse caught Caleb Clark 2 years ago, but he was in the right position. Like Gaza always had the right angle. So he had a very great possibility of catching him. Fassi will sometimes bite in too quickly. He has a bit of a languid style, and so he's going to need to be in the right spot at the right time. So Willy's got, I don't know, Fassi might have 6 steps on Willy by this point, maybe 5. But the one thing about Willy is he will always be in the right spot to start with. And if he's not, he's going to be mad at himself and he won't do it again the rest of the match. I don't know if Fassi sometimes sees the game vertically. You know how you have your technology now when you're reversing your car where you can see from the top, or I think there's something about that Fassi is still learning, which is to see the field as if you're a bird. And so starting to sort of fade a little bit to the touch line, I think he waits and thinks, oh, I can do that. I have plenty of speed. Once the ball is kicked and I see where it's going, then I'll catch it, instead of doing what I was talking about Ben Jason Dixon doing, which is, where will it be? Prophesying. So if there's a church of Fassi, we want Fassi to be more of a prophet this time and start to get revelations about where Mackenzie's going to kick the ball. All the best fullbacks, look at the guy like Hugo Keenan, always seems to be in the right spot. Why is that? It's not by magic. Number one, he wins the Bronco, Hugo Keenan. He's the fittest guy in Ireland. He could go to sevens and easily do it. 2, he studies. Fassi's going to have less time in the club and more time in front of the TV, going back and forth, just on your iPad, figuring out tendencies, just like it's a video game. Do I think Fassi can do it? Absolutely. Has he done it yet? No. And Rassi's point is, Rassi de Fassi, this is your time. I don't know if there's ever been any other instance in Bok rugby, and I've been watching it forever. I feel like I've been watching it before I was even born, where one player has been put in as much of a spotlight as right now. If you just look at the teams and you see how it all lines up, it just becomes a Fassi show. If he can handle the kicks, if he can handle the positioning, I feel confident he can do the other stuff, which is give him any kind of sniff and he's gone. But if he can handle the defensive assignments, the interplay between him and Jesse is going to be critical. And listening on time to a guy like Kobus and then Pollard, because that's probably who will be barking the orders. Got to make sure that you react.
Yeah, you mentioned all the technical stuff that he's very good at, but it's the All Blacks at Ellis Park. What about the mental side of it?
How do you react when you have done something wrong, right? I remember a match where I did something so wrong that it was like I had to just get it out of my mind, and I didn't know how to get it out of my mind. So all I did was become more and more brutal and rough and dirty. I mean, it kind of snapped me out of it, and I got back in the game. But I've known about guys that they make a mistake, and then the rest of the whole match they're still hanging their head. That's why they call it a test match. So Fassi will probably will make a mistake. Let's just assume that Fassi will make a mistake. Willy makes mistakes. Then he gets really upset with himself and he does something really good. So he's the comeback guy. But he doesn't go through. I've never seen Willy go through a test match unless it was that cameo. He came on for 3 minutes and scored a try from a bubbled ball. I mean, there's those moments. But if you give him 80 minutes for the Bulls, you see plenty of mistakes. He actually tries a lot of things. He has the green light. I think Fassi has a green light, but I think probably the coaches are also saying, make sure that when you launch, that you have something on both sides. Don't just come from the back from deep like you do with the Sharks and weave your way through a bunch of tired Welsh tacklers. This is, you're gonna get tattooed by Tamati.
I wanted to just say something about Billy now. I just thought of that last night. Curtly Arendse won everything I think that was available, including Janitor of the Year. If it was an award, he would have won it. And every time they wanted to ask him to say something, he would run off the stage because he's a shy guy. So eventually they cornered him and he said, okay, now you have to say something now. And he said, yeah, I don't deserve this. I should have given it to Billy. Off he went. So there we go. Interesting.
Billy's at a different point of his career, and I think he's not necessarily going to make it all the way to Australia in 2027. So it makes sense at some point. When does it make sense? Again, this is an issue inside the camp. If he had bad ribs, which is hell to play with, and it's not like Billy loves tackling anyway. I mean, I'm not saying he's a bad tackler. I'm just saying he doesn't relish it. He doesn't go to sleep at night thinking, "Ooh, I'm going to really have that, strong tackle." Fassi's a physical guy. He looks skinny, sure, but he's thin, but he's strong. And I've never seen him, just get munched by anyone. So I think there might have been some issue about that too, is if there's a breakaway and you have Will Jordan and you have Bowden Barrett, 1-2 in the trams, who can recover and who can maybe chase someone down, even with a mistake? Fassi's probably your man.
Yeah, I remember I've told you this many times before, but Fassi ran after Kane and Moody and overhauled him. That's something I cannot to this day get over it. That gives you an indication how fast the guy actually is. All right. Harry, one last question about our good friend Fassi, the Prophet. Somebody asked you on X or Twitter about Fassi opposed to Caleb Clark, catching him, stopping him, tackling him. You had a good answer for that. What you thinking about? I know Fassi had a bit of a problem with his defense. That's why he was, after his debut, was sort of, dropped for a while, and now he's come back. Did he sort out his defensive problems, do you think?
He's getting there. So we divide players into coachable or not coachable. It's a spectrum. And Fassi would be a coachable player. It doesn't mean that he doesn't have a strong will or strong head. He's not stubborn. He is. That's what you want in a top athlete. But he's coachable. One of the floating coaches that they're using now is Dwayne. Dwayne is sort of a coach without a portfolio, but he takes on the players where they're kind of falling between the cracks. And Dwayne's very good at positioning and using another player's momentum and weight in the tackle. Actually, it's one of the things he was best at. It's not really covered, because you think of Dwayne as Thor, and so he can, stop someone like a polar bear versus a grizzly bear, just go straight up top and wrestle them. But he actually was very clever, especially starting out with the Stormers. Played a lot of 6 and 7 at going low, and so Fassi goes low. Fassi goes much lower than Willie. Willie is getting knocked in the head a lot of times because he's standing up too upright. Fassi's not afraid of contact. He's not like a Kerwin Bosch, with speed and athleticism, but doesn't really like, the contact. Fassi's fine with it. He has confidence that he can shift at the final instant and that he can slither and he can find crevices. It reminds me of a time I was sent to Mexico to fire a guy. A client had said, you have to go fire this guy. He's very scary. So, the HR lady has to read the termination offenses, but we want you there and then just supervise the situation. So I'm flying down there. On the way there, I'm watching a video, and it's like explaining how in a street fight, if someone was taking a big wide swing at you, what you would do with that, especially if the guy was bigger than you, and use his own momentum to break his arm. And so I get down there, we go to the factory. The guy's been stealing money for 10 years. So the HR lady, who's tiny, is reading the termination offenses, which you have to do in Latin American countries, and literally walk through it. He's getting more and more upset. At some point, he starts to swing, gonna punch this lady. If he had landed, I think he would have put her in the hospital for sure. I just did exactly what they showed on the video. I had just seen it. So I broke his arm. The funny part was that my client had said, go down there and do this, but I don't want it to cost me an arm and a leg. So I texted him right away and I said, I cost you an arm and I want to get out of here in a hurry. So we're driving to the airport, and I'm just trying to hunker down behind the seats and wait until you actually take off before I think, yeah, no one's going to arrest me. I tell that story because Dwayne is teaching the Boks all of his dark secrets. Dwayne's funny. He wouldn't really tell people why he was playing. But now that he's a coach, he's got his coach hat on. He's like, this is how you make a big body like Caleb Clark be his own worst enemy. And Caleb Clark is not the most disciplined of athletes. So he'll give you exactly what you see. It's a bit like Jonah Lomu. The problem was you couldn't stop it because he was so big and powerful. So what did they do? What did the Bok defenders do? Try to go as low as possible and don't get trampled on, and have another guy help you. Fassi doesn't need to stop Caleb Clark on his own self. He needs to slow him down. He needs to engage him and use Caleb Clark's burst and speed and size against him. He's going to chop him down, and then hopefully someone's coming for the cover. The Lekkerbacks. Lekkerbacks to the rescue. But yeah, the bigger the guy is, the more confident he can feel in his size and lunge. He can expend energy. And what Dwayne's doing one by one. And another thing is Dwayne's doing a lot of work, understand, with the bench. So whoever's named on the bench, it's like now you've got this like floating coach, whether it's about scrums, whether it's about rucks, whether it's about mauls, he's like assigned to be that guy. And I think Fassi's a project, no matter what we feel about him, no matter what, whoever's not really in the church of Fassi, if you're a non-believer, this is the proof. Like, so if you wanted something, then you're going to see it right now, you won't. And I hope everyone is a grown man or woman enough to admit, if they see that he's good, to go, okay, I didn't see that. And that's what I think we should be. Prepare to be pleasantly surprised, because I think the guys like Jerry Flannery is really seeing something in him that he hasn't seen before. It's just raw athletic ability translated into a sporting code that it's a lot about territory and positioning. And if he can learn that, if he can see the field from the top, and if he can, learn how to break a guy's arm using the guy's weight, don't break his arm necessarily, then that's going to be the final pieces of the puzzle. And let's also be honest, Willie has never been that great a tackler. He doesn't bring that to the field. He brings so many other things that I love, but it's not like he's a one-on-one open field, sure thing.
The question that when you were talking there is, we're all singing the praises of Fassi, and we're going to be pleasantly surprised, and we're going to, be converts. And then Damien Willemse comes back. And then you have another supreme athlete that's got all these things that you just talked about. So what now? What do you think is going to happen?
Doesn't the case of Jasper Wiese teach us that there still is incumbency, even though there is some versatility doctrine now, like, make sure we're getting more and more versatile. You still come back to your position that you held if it was one of those positions, 8, 15, 3. I think there's some positions on the field where you are the incumbent. Willemse was the incumbent. Willemse had taken the place of Willie. Willie was coming in more on the reserve bench. I think in the World Cup matches, when it really mattered, when everything was on the line, Willemse was actually a lock. I mean, he was put in the team immediately. It was typed in there. So I think he does come back in. This is all about that third team. This is all about that 1,000, and then, okay, where's my caps? It falls off from 1,000 to 200. That number needs to be more like 500. And we found a few guys. I mean, this is actually a very successful season so far, just for the issue of finding Ben Jason Dixon and Elrich Lowe and Sasha fitting into Test rugby and belonging. There were a couple of other guys that didn't. Jordan Hendrickson would be an example of someone who kind of was found out at that level. I think you have to give Fassi the ability to fail or not. I think he's playing to be in the squad of 35 and possibly in a 23. Because it's true also with Fassi, if he was a player at 23, he covers a lot of positions.
Yeah, interesting. If you had to choose one pivotal moment of the World Cup last year, it would be that scrum. And that's Damien Willemse. There you go.
The immediacy of it, the confidence of it, the rugby IQ. I was in a pretty good seat, but it was all French around me, and so they all turned to us and questioned us. I don't know why they thought we would know, and they said, "But can you do that?"
Clearly we can.
And I was like, fuck yes, but I had no idea. And I and I just thought, wow, that's really interesting. Now, when you watch Chasing the Sun, they talk about that, and so there may be some more chatter around it, but it was still actually an instinctive act by a person who does know rugby. So yeah, I think so. That would be where Fassi's hole is, right? Is knowing rugby as well as Willemse does and Willie. Those two, Willemse and Willie, are two guys that you could absolutely sit down with any coach, any analyst, and they would soak up the knowledge. They eat and drink and breathe rugby. Not so sure about Fassi. Now, I think if Fassi becomes a star, and that's what they're trying to make him into, he'll get there because when you become really good at something, you want to know everything about it.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about the bench. When I spoke to Jan de Koning yesterday, I said maybe this bench is not a bomb squad, it's a blitzpatrolie, which is Afrikaans for flying squad rather than a bomb squad. A lot of discussion going about that. And then suddenly Eben lands up on the bench and it throws my whole theory out of the window. And I was starting to wonder, you've got Andre there. Shouldn't they have dropped Andre and then kept Marku, for example, and kept the speed that you just mentioned? Eben was a center at school, so speed is still a thing there. Andre is fast and everything else, but it sort of, doesn't really play into the idea of this fast bench as much as it would do as a 7-1 bench. I mean, last two times we played against the All Blacks, we did 7-1. Why didn't we go 7-1 again this time? What's your thinking about that?
Okay, correct me if I'm wrong, but in the quarterfinal and the semifinal of the World Cup, wasn't Andre on the bench and came in and won the match? He only started in the final one. I think when they look back on those matches, they preferred how the team looked against the French and not so much in the final. So I think their thinking is that Andre could be actually a bench player, not right now, but down the road. And if he was, he also gives you adaptability because he can play 12. Like he absolutely can play 12. He's not like an Owen Farrell where every time he plays 12, you think, he shouldn't be playing there. I think Andre looks fine there. So yeah, I think it's the idea of starting much quicker and then having the tool. Like I don't think Andre slows it down so much because he actually has a really quick pass. He's got a long flat one too. And that's what makes people go quicker. It's not that he would run to the outside. And I don't think they need him to make breaks the way he did when he was 23 years old. I just think he solves other problems. So if someone's having an off day off the tee, he solves that problem. If the guys are not talking to each other and calling the plays right, Andre's a good organizer. He's still viewed as a vice captain. If you need to shape the game differently, like you just say, we're playing in the green area and we should be in the red area, and our quadrants are off, or our cadence is off on our kick chase. So you throw Andre in and he fixes it. So Kurt Lee knows exactly when to start chasing. There's a predictability. There's a height factor because Andre puts so much air under his kicks that it makes the chase easier. And I think also people trust him. So let's say you're just having a weird day where things are going right, not going right. There's a card. Maybe the card goes to the wrong guy. It's Fassi. He jumps up and does a karate kick with his foot. It's kind of nice to say, let's see Andre come on in and kind of just calm everything down. Let's get through these 10 minutes.
Talking about the bench, Eben is clearly going to go to 4. I mean, that's a given. So what else happens if Eben goes on? Does Pieter-Steph come off? Does he go to 7? Does Ben Jason come off? Where does Elrich go to? Does Kocher go to 6? What's your thinking behind that? Because there's so many permutations. I mean, the All Blacks must be scratching their heads as well.
Yeah, what I think they like about it is that so Pieter-Steph is comfortable playing lock, but he probably is more comfortable playing lock if he's with Eben. So if you end up with an Eben Pieter-Steph second row, Ben Jason can easily go 80. You have some options there when you look at the bench and you say, where do I want Elrich to come in? I think Sia is the one you would think would naturally go off first in the back 5. And then possibly Ruan. He looks like he has a lot of gas as well. I don't know what Jasper's match conditioning looks like. So that's also one of those iffy things. But I think you can see that would be like if it's optimum. So what if something weird happens? A card or an injury? This is a very interesting match to draw up. I would imagine that someone's job, and it might be Dwayne's, who knows, maybe it's Jerry Flannery's, is to go down every permutation and say if, and then have a little flow chart. And then in Rusty fashion, you'll just throw it away. But
Yeah.
yeah, but I think there's enough adaptability on that bench. And one of the things is Peter Steph, for all the talk about tiring the box out and the big forwards, and Peter Steph can go 80, Ben Jason can go 80. When Jasper's fit, he can go 80. I mean, he's always Leicester Tigers put a lot on him. I think he's a 15 carry, 10 tackle a guy for Leicester Tigers. And then he played the most minutes. Jasper Wiese played the most minutes in 2022 of any Bok player on the field on for any kind of match. So he's got that stamina. And then, I think the interesting thing is does it come on en masse the way the bomb squad has been doing? Like we all run on at the same time, this big dramatic moment? I don't think so. I think this time it's going to be marks on pretty quickly, and then props when you see props tire, and then hold back a little bit. Eben's probably the fuse on the bomb. That's probably where when he comes on, then okay, now we're fully in it, and it's just going to be a drive to the finish.
I think Ruan, for all his qualities and everything, the biggest one that stands out for me is the fact he's known to have a big engine. That's the word they use to when they refer to him. Like he never stops. I don't think he's going to come off. Also because he's calling the lineouts and everything else. So I think Peter Steph might move to 7. And then the thing is, I think Jasper is not that match fit from what I've heard. So through the grapevine, he might be coming off sooner rather than later. And then I think Elrich's going to go on to 8. That's the thinking. And I agree with you. Kocha goes to 6. Yeah.
Okay, let's imagine that pack. We have Elrich Lowe at 8. We have Peter Steph at 7 or 6. Ben Jason 7 6. It won't even matter between those two. And then you have Ruan and Eben. That's a giant pack. It's a monster pack, and that's interesting. Now that might be good because the All Blacks are going to start with their monster pack. They're really big props. Lomax and Williams will actually be bigger than France and Ox. They're on the final 40. They've got a big hooker. They'll be bigger than our hookers, bigger than Mark's even. So it might be fighting fire with fire. It's very interesting because you can see this Bok team as being a very quick team, and then you can see it finishing as a big team.
Well, talking about the props now, I speculated. Hendrik Cronje said, it looks like maybe Steenkamp might be starting as prop rather than Ox, and Ox comes off the bench. That didn't pan out. They kept to the tried and tested front rows and replacements and everything else. Just briefly, your thinking about that?
And Mike, it gives us a bit of an inkling, a hint about where Kitshoff was on conditioning. You would think this would be a normal one for him to slot back in. I don't think it was quite up to par. And so it kind of makes sense. I mean, Steenkamp hadn't done anything to disqualify himself, but you would normally think in the normal scheme of things, it would have been Steven on, but no, the Spicy Plum is going to get match fit again. And I think that's smart. I think actually in the old days, we would have forced people back in because of this idea of, my slot, my place, come back in too quickly sometimes. That's a tough thing to do against the other best scrumming team in the world. Like there was no budge in the World Cup final. There hasn't been any scrum penalties have been very difficult to come by for both teams against each other in last 2 years.
Sitten Cars has a wide selection of vehicles available at sittencars.co.za and at our branches at Casino and Menlyn. With over 30 years of trust and excellence, Sitten Cars is your #1 nationwide dealership. With over 95% customer satisfaction, our hand-picked cars will ensure that you find your dream car from one of the top brands available at Sitten Cars. Sitten Cars, the better way to buy and sell cars. Let's talk about the All Blacks. Fairly for us, not watching Super Rugby. I've said it before. We only watch proper rugby, rugby. I'm going to get nailed for that again. I'm joking, people. I'm joking. But we don't know these All Blacks as well as we used to. I mean, when the All Blacks arrived here, we knew exactly who each player was and what their strengths was, and weaknesses was. We played against them often. But now things are a bit different. Tell me about this team. Who's standing out for you? Who should be keeping an eye on?
Well, to some extent, even though we've spoken about Tamaiti Williams, who's a 145 to 150 kilogram prop and a new quantity with Ethan Nakruit out. So he'll be a loose head locking down against Frans Malherbe, which will be a classic battle. So he's a new guy. But actually, when you think about it, it's almost like Back to the Future with the All Blacks. There's a dairy farmer that farms in the shadow of a snowy mountain in Taranaki named Smiley Barrett. And he has progenited 3 of the All Blacks, and we all know them, the Barrett brothers. Apparently, there's 2 more. But I was musing at how wonderful it must be to be him, and I left out Mrs. Barrett. For them to sit there as a couple and just think, we made that in the second best team in the world, in an incredibly elite, highly combative collision sport. 1/5, 20% of the All Blacks are our kids. We made that, so that's amazing. So there's a lot of continuity. And look, I mean, the Barretts, you have Sam Cane back in the mix. Sam Cane is a guy who will only bring you exactly what it is you think that he'll bring you. And he'll just do that. He's not going to be overawed by Ellis Park. There's nothing about that will freak him out. Artie Savea is a well-known World Player of the Year type guy. So there's plenty there that you'll recognize. I think, it's at lock. They have the same lock crisis that we have. So Sam Darry will be on the bench. But you're going to look at Scott Barrett and Tupou Vaa'i. Tupou Vaa'i sort of fits into the old mold of a highly mobile, athletic line-out type lock, but he's also pretty good around the park, and he will monster some people. Like if you're in the wrong position and you're not ready, he'll take out your ribs. He'll do my style of job termination on you. Midfield, well settled. There's some discussion around the wings. And so here's what happened. Razor Robertson is under pressure, not because of what's happened so far, except for the Argentina loss was bad. It's the compounding problem if you keep losing. If you lose again and again, and you're looking at the end of the year tours, it's a bleak year. You don't want to be the worst season of any All Black coach. That's not cool. Last 3 or 4 years have been the worst overall record of any All Black team in that particular time, right? So it's not just about pressure on Razor, it's pressure on the All Black institution. Are we scary enough? Are we good enough? And what Razor's done with that is my way or the highway on Leon, his friend McDonald, and said, no, we're not going to go down different pathways. I'm not going to do experimentation. We're not going to be Rossi. We're going to actually crawl back into our shells, and we're going to try and be the best scrum and the best line out, the cleanest ball, and the quickest, crispest passes, like right in front of you on target. And so one thing that he came to is we're playing people all over the park in different positions. Caleb Clark is a left wing. Mark Tilley is a right wing. But they were squeezing Mark Tilley onto the left wing because they wanted Will Jordan to be a wing, even though Will Jordan's more of a fullback. So I would expect that this thing will continue to go back and forth until Razor has Will Jordan at fullback, and everyone playing in the position they're supposed to be. But he had to do that diplomatically because he was a new coach. But Caleb Clark had a wonderful Super Rugby season. He was pretty much untackleable. He lost some weight. He's quicker around the park. Talea's on the bench to be a game breaker, as if they didn't have enough game breakers. But if that happens, Will Jordan can shift. Bowden Barrett can go into fly-off position, and they can move the people around. So they are looking with a 5-3 bench. They're looking for more permutations in the back line, and we're looking for more permutations in the forward pack. And that just seems like Springbok All Black forever.
Classic stuff. All right. I asked you before we talked, do you see any difference in this team now that Leon McDonald has left? Maybe that Razor is putting more of his own stamp on this team, or is it still like you just said, you can't put Will Jordan at fullback because he's still too new and you don't want to ruffle any feathers? Is there any signs of Razor now starting to assert his authority?
New Zealand rugby culture is strange. It's not quite as bold and brazen as South African rugby. It doesn't accept as much innovation as is happening in Ireland right now. New Zealand's almost like an old-fashioned pay your dues. There's a group of guys in blazers in a boardroom somewhere where you have to go talk to them. Selection is not even always something you own. Even terminations as a coach are done so privately that it almost seems like nothing happened. It's all about succession and keeping the peace. It's almost like like an ancient warrior culture, like in Japan, where everything's done with these like polite greetings and no one ever says what really they think. So Razor is trying to tread lightly, like you say, because he doesn't want to ruffle the feathers of those 65-year-old guys that actually run things. And he knows that they're not happy. Like, you cannot be happy as an All Black, a former All Black who's part of the organization, and you lose to the Pumas in New Zealand. You just cannot be happy. And they look at this particular 2-match series as an old-fashioned tour. Ian Foster saved his job by winning the second match. Razor knows that if he was to split and win one of these, he's pretty much good. Like, he's pretty much okay. If he loses both, particularly if they're bad, if they're like the ones that the first one that happened, 26-10, I think it was a year ago, 2 years ago. If both of those go that way, there's going to be consternation about the defense, mostly. Why are All Blacks letting in tries? Why are so many people scoring tries on us? Why is it so easy? England scores some really soft tries against them. Argentina clowned them in that first match. So I don't think that ever sits right with them. I think Razor's doing let's go back to basics. Sam Cane is a basics pick. He almost retired. He did retire. He unretired. There's so many Barretts on the field. Everyone's sort of just coming back to their basics. Cody Taylor still at hooker. There's a lot of people in New Zealand that want to move on from that and have a new breed. But it looks like to me, they're going to be the ones playing traditional ball, and the Springboks are going to be playing what we used to associate with as New Zealand innovative rugby.
You mentioned earlier that Sam Cane is not going to be intimidated by Ellis Park. So two things there. Number one, Sam Cane, he's got a score to settle, or a few scores to settle after that World Cup final.
Yeah.
And secondly, I just told you, Jan de Koning told us yesterday that when they spoke to the All Blacks, they realized that the All Blacks are only going to step foot on Ellis Park soil the day of the match when they run into the field. And I mean, that's not the easiest place to sort of, just pitch up and hope for the best. That atmosphere, like I said, there's probably going to be at least 2 planes going over there, maybe 3 for that matter, just to really drive the point home. That's going to be intimidating. Do you think this young All Black guys that's never been here before, how are they going to adapt to that? How are they going to take that?
So I got to think of a person as an example, right? Because there's plenty of people that are experienced. I think you're right. There's some people who have completely no experience. And then there's people who have played over 100 tests, like Beauden Barrett. You're probably going to do what you always do in those situations. You're going to look for the 4 or 5 team leaders, the actual leaders. I mean, leaders when they go play on their Tuesday golf excursions. That's apparently Geordie Barrett is the leader of that, the whole golf culture. So there's private leadership. There's an ability to say, hey, young fella, this is what it's going to look like and feel like. But when I look at the back line, I don't really see any of that. I don't see any poverty of experience there. Probably the one is McKenzie. I would say McKenzie probably has the most pressure on him is, can you guide a team against the umbrella, blitz, rush, supersonic D thing, whatever that's called nowadays, where we're just coming out of our shoes and Jesse Creel's just doing wind sprints until he throws up. Like, can you find the 13? Can they manufacture a break on traditional phase play? Forward play, Tamaiti Williams would be one of those guys. What if he gets pinged a couple of times because Malherbe has figured him out and has the tricks of the trade? That would be rough. And I know, Ellis Park, when you start to get scrum penalties, it's going to be like Loftus' scrum penalties. We love the scrum, and the next time the referee says scrum, we're just going to be like ready to go. And I'll be rolling my camera on my phone, ready to get one of those moments. That's tough. He's a big guy. He's a little bit tall. And sometimes France does really good jobs against guys like that. It's almost like France has trouble sometimes, not much trouble, but more with the short, squatty guys.
But you mentioned a couple of times also on X about the fact that the All Blacks kick a lot, and you expect them to kick even more in this game. Different types of up and unders and long kicks and deep kicks and, all kinds of different kicks. Is that how you expect them to tackle the Boks? Is that their plan to keep us on the right side of the field? What can the Boks expect from the All Blacks?
Against a high line defense that blitzes, so it is rush, but it sends different players. This time it's Jesse, next time it's Kurtley cutting in. When you face that, the obvious thing is to kick over, is to kick through, and it's to kick around. The quickest way to get to that fool's gold space to Caleb Clark is to kick it to him. That's actually, if that comes off and that works, or Will Jordan, they're off to the races, because everyone's so far up. Now it's one-on-one. It's just Will Jordan versus Aphelele Fassi. You hope that Fassi's in the right, picks the right line and goes the right place. So you would think you'd have 4, 5, 6 of those attacking kicks. Then you're going to have the kicks that just relieve pressure, and you are turning your guys into chasers, and you're keeping your forwards moving forward. And then you have the exit kicks and the pressure kicks, and then you have the box kicks. So, what is a good number? At least 30, 35. The match that we got to know Willie LaRue, Jesse Creel, Andre Pollard, semifinal, Twickenham in the rain, 2015. The All Blacks kicked 47 times. That's how many times Dan Carter and those guys decided that they're going to do. So if you got Fassi at the back, I want to kick on him 7 or 8 times. Awkward. I want to put a little bit of spin on it, a little bit of English. I want things to be very difficult. I don't know what the sun's going to be at 5 o'clock, 5:30, but it's interesting to see what that plays into it as well. You just want a young fellow like Fassi to have awkwardness and uncomfortability. You also want to have the interplay between the Lekkerbacks who come back, and perhaps Visa will sometimes hang back for kicks as well. You want to have that coordination tested, and you're not going to get that test on kick 1 or kick 2 or kick 3. Everyone back in Taranaki, the dairy farmers are like, stop kicking, but just keep doing it, because you need the law of numbers to help you. Because what does it take out of 8 kicks? If one of those spills, try. That's it. That's the easiest way to score a try. You kick something, they drop it, you run it in. Boom, thank you. No one gets hurt, you score a try, and you take your 7. So they're going to have 7, 8, 9 kicks on Fassi. They're also going to try, I think, to make Dialende and Creel have hesitation. And the way you do that is you put the ball on the toe, behind, you slide it around, you grub her. Anything to where that first step, Jesse has to go, not sure. Just that one little tiny hitch. And so, I think kicking is the game. Look, both sides are going to kick a lot. Once I kick, you kind of have to kick. Who stops? You just stop whenever someone has a bad kick and it goes out and it's short, and then you have position.
All right, and the Springboks, how would they approach this game? What would they have in mind to be able to overcome this challenge of the All Blacks?
Oh man, so they've been hyped up this year to run more, to take on. There's a desire to show superiority. This is the next, and this is the final phase of Rassi's plan for world domination of rugby. In these next 4 years, this cycle, it's super important to him and the other guys that we stop this underdog culture. Like the very thing we were always joking about. They want to be able to play as favorites, and it's impossible to get to the point where you're equal and better than the 2011 and 15 All Blacks, who were always favored. They always were the favorites, and they stepped on the field every single time as the favorites. Wearing the favorites mantle, putting that cloak on, and being comfortable in it is what they want to breed. And to do that, you have to score. It cannot be always winning by 1 point. You have to be able to score. And so I think the template really looked back on Ireland. Ireland is a better team right now than New Zealand. And the game in Loftus was probably, if all the chances are taken and, junk time tries for Ireland are subtracted, that game, which was a proper hiding. Even with the missed kicks and chances and the sort of consolation try, it still was a proper beating. That's what they want.
All right, so you and I had a bit of a discussion again before the game. We almost on the same page. We differ slightly about how it's going to happen, but your prediction, more or less, what you're expecting, who's going to walk away the winner?
I think Springboks should win. I pegged it at 6, but you just have to pick a margin. I would probably, if I was being scientific, I would say between 5 and 8. Sort of a try converted or a try and a penalty. The way that shapes out, like I've said, I think it's going to be essentially an even game up until the final 20 minutes. I just think that when you add the not just the star players, but you put together the cohesion of Koch and Marks and Eben and Pollard, that just creates a spine in the team that you can still have the game breakers around that. But it feels like to me one of those games where New Zealand has to be up a lot. And no one's been able to score easily. Even the Irish tries came from very exotic moves that I think, it made Jerry Flannery so upset. I think he probably didn't sleep. And he's been trying to close that down. And it looks like the defense, the pillar post defense around the ruck has really tightened up. And kudos to Lowe in that one. Lowe has been a really good tackler. I would say Jasper Wiese, if I was just to sort of guess right now, someone who's going to have a massive match, it would be Wiese. I think Wiese has been chewing the furniture.
I can picture that, yeah.
Right? He's been like ramming himself into the wall in his house going, I want to play.
Yeah, shame, man. The guy with the longest suspension, like Jan said yesterday, the 6-match suspension turned into a 3-month suspension because of the time when it happened. It's such an unfortunate thing. No, I'm excited. I think it's going to be a good game. I'll be there. You'll be there. I look forward to actually experiencing Ellis Park for the first time, believe it or not. I'm actually a Loftus boykie. Never been to Ellis Park before, so there you go.
Yeah, it's a fantastic place. You want to get there and you want to get out, but while you're in, it is nothing like it. There's very few places in rugby. I've been to Eden Park and I've been to Aviva in Dublin, and these are sort of the cathedrals of rugby right now. And even though, all due respect to your Loftus, which I also enjoy very much, there's something about Ellis Park that just seems to amp it up just a little bit more.
Yeah. All right, Harry, thanks for that. I appreciate it. See you soon in South Africa, and then we'll talk again after the match to see how much of our predictions came through. Have a safe
Cheers,
flight.
everyone's at the game. You see me, come by and say hi.
Yeah, please do. All right.
This is the Lekker Rugby Pod with Harry Jones and Welman.